It's a good morning and it promises to be an action-packed day today because we are riding not one, not two, but 5 new motorcycles. And the thing is, 3 of these are from Moto Morini and 2 of them are from Zontes. Now they're off-road motorcycles, they're on-road motorcycles, and we are going to be riding them on an off-road course. We're going to be riding them on the road, and we do not know much about these motorcycles right now, but I hope to change that by the end of the day. Hi, my name is Dhruv, Paliwal. You're watching AutoX, and today we're riding 5 new motorcycles.
Okay, so now while Dhruv is out riding the bikes, let me give you some of the tech specs of all of these bikes. We'll start with this. This is the Moto Morini Xcape 650X. There's also a standard Xcape 650. Now the only difference between the X and the standard version is that the X, it gets spoke rims and the standard version gets alloys. And this has a slightly taller seat height. This is 830 mm versus the standard one is 800 mm. Of course, this is slightly more off-road biased, but that said, both of them have the same engine. It's a 649cc inline twin engine that's liquid cooled and 8 valve. It makes 59 bhp and 54 Nm of torque, and of course it's mated to a 6-speed transmission. Now let me just give you an insight into how it sounds. Let's put it into... So it does sound good. It has quite a nice growl to it. I really like how it looks as well. There's a certain red Italian motorcycle that it's trying to sort of lurk in the shadow of. But I think it does look nice. Yes, people will mistake it for that Italian motorcycle. But I think yes, it does look nice. It looks substantial. It looks like an expensive motorcycle. It looks like a big motorcycle. In terms of the riding position, yes, it is tall and it is also heavy. But that said, when you're out off-road, out here in this off-road zone, it's actually really nice. Very easy to stand up and ride as well. Now, when you are in this seating position, you can also spot that there's a nice, bright, huge TFT display. So this gives you your RPMs. You can also change it via the switch gear here. So you can change the riding modes. And of course, you can change the layout of the display. I must say the display is really nice and bright. It's a hot sunny day today and we've had no problem with the display's brightness. So in that regard, it's very good. All the switch gear also looks fairly high quality, to be honest. All this is nice and clicky. There's really good positive feedback from all the switches. So that said, in terms of the fit and finish, these bikes are very good. Yes, there are of course some exposed cables, some slightly exposed welds, but overall, these are nicely finished motorcycles. Now in terms of suspension, at the front is an upside down telescopic fork. Now this is fully adjustable for your compression, your rebound and your preload. At the back is a single shock absorber that's only adjustable for rebound and for preload. Now in terms of the braking performance, you have a double floating 298mm disc up front. Of course, this is dual channel ABS. At the back is a 255mm single disc. At the front, a 4-piston caliper at the front, and there's a 2-piston caliper at the rear. You also have an adjustable ABS mode. So in the off-road mode, you can switch off the ABS rear tire and you can slide the bike around, which I think Dhruv is doing just now. So that's the overall package for the Xcape 650X. They don't feel ultra high premium. They have a good amount of power. I like the ergonomics, but to tell you a little bit more about the riding experience, I think I can sense Dhruv is coming.
Yeah, Karan, I can see that you've been boring them with your mumbo jumbo about the tech specs, but let me just tell you about what this motorcycle is like to ride. And honestly, this is the first motorcycle I sat on as soon as I came in this morning, and I was a little intimidated by it, seeing its size, seeing the fact that the seating, it looked like it was too high, and honestly it is. Despite this being scooped out here, for someone like me who's 5'7", it takes a little bit for me to get used to the motorcycle. But once I got used to this motorcycle, I think it was very easy to get confident on it. The engine, it just pulls. You have bottom and grunt over here, and the controls, they all fall to hand very easily. The one thing I know, we've only ridden it off-road, and I thought that the best way to be riding this motorcycle is if you are standing up. Sitting down, it really doesn't inspire a lot of confidence off-road, and that's because you're constantly having to jam your foot out as you lean the bike over. But then what happens is when you're trying to come back, these pegs, they kind of get into the way, and if you're not used to them, what happens is that you get stuck and you end up stalling the motorcycle, which is fine, but then by the time you have to bring your foot back down, it sometimes gets caught on these pegs. Now this is kind of a teething issue, but something that I've faced on all the motorcycles that I am riding here today. The Xcape 650, I think the riding experience off-road of this has been the one which has allowed me to do the maximum number of challenges, the maximum number of obstacles here around this course. Okay, now let's move on to the next motorcycle.
Okay, so this is the second Moto Morini that we are riding here on the off-road track. This is called, excuse my Italian, the name is something like Cinematographer. It's like a confusing name, just call it the Scrambler. You can call it the 6.5 Scrambler because there's 6.5 badges all around. The 6.5 is of course look into what the engine is. This is a 649cc inline twin engine. It's the same engine as we saw on the Xcape bikes, but it makes a little less power. So this is 54 bhp and 54 Nm of torque. The torque figure is the same as the Xcape. Aside from that, you get 43 mm upside down forks at the front, but while on the Xcapes they were fully adjustable, there's no adjustment here. You do get a single monoshock at the back that has some adjustment. Aside from that, this Scrambler is quite nice to look at actually. It's got a nice leather ribbed seat. So I'll just get onto it. Of course, the seat height is fairly accessible. It's a 795 mm seat height, fairly accessible. In terms of the switch gear, all of this is the same as the Xcape. So that means the switches are actually really nice, really good positive feedback from the switches. I really like how the switches are executed. You do have a much smaller screen here, but again, it is fairly bright. You can, customize it a little bit to your liking. So you can, of course, you can also connect your phone to these bikes and play music and stuff like that and adjust it. You can also adjust the view of the display, you can adjust the brightness and all of that. So that's pretty nice to see here. I'll just give you a sound check. So it does sound good. Again, it has that growl that the Xcape also had, and I really like that. I also like the golden forks. I think overall it's a very nice looking motorcycle. Yes, in terms of the equipment, it does fall short of the Xcape, especially in terms of the screen and the fully adjustable suspension. But aside from that, it is a fairly nice motorcycle. Now, Moto Morini doesn't mention how big the brake rotors are for the Scrambler, but you get a double disc at the front, you get a single disc at the back, and yes, it does have dual channel ABS. Overall, of course, yes, this is a Scrambler, and my first impressions are that the clutch is a little bit heavy. So in stop-start traffic, you might find it maybe a little bit too cumbersome. But aside from that, really good first impressions. The quality seems spot on. I also like these round mirrors, and the overall really retro styling is pretty cool. But Dhruv has been riding this around, sliding this around and having lots of fun with the Scrambler. So let's hear what he has to say about the riding experience.
Yeah, you can see the smile on my face, so you know what I'm about to say. Of the three motorcycles that I have ridden on this off-road course, this is my favorite. I cannot pronounce it to save my life. I'm just calling it the Scrambler. I'm sure Karan has given you all the details. What I want to talk about here is this. I've never been a big fan of Scramblers because they kind of get caught in the middle. They're not doing off-road bits well, they're not doing on-road bits well. But if you get a Scrambler that you can really sink your teeth into, then I think flat tracking becomes a very nice option, and that's something that I really like. That's something I've been doing all day long. In fact, this is the motorcycle I've paid the most amount of attention to. I want to tell you this. Of all the three that I've ridden until now, it was the easiest getting behind the handlebar of this motorcycle, getting into position and pushing it, gunning it, making it slide, making it step out and then getting it back in. I think the throttle response on this, just a little too crisp, but the thing is, that's good because when you want to slide your motorcycle, you want that extra bit of crispness so that you can easily break traction. On the other motorcycles, I was facing this problem that the traction, in some bits, it was not easy to brake, so you were actually getting a lot of speed in where you didn't want speed and you wanted your rear to slide. Now, the one thing that's really working in my favor here is this area. Despite this being like a sculpted, like a large tank, they made sure that there's space here so that you can easily grip it, so especially when you are trying to push motorcycle down in the corners. You're trying to keep your body upright, make it slide, keep it down so that you can take a corner at speed. This contact patch with this rubberized accessory really works well. Apart from that, I have not ridden this motorcycle on the road and I will not be doing that today. But from what I have been told by our instructors over here, this motorcycle seems to work well on road as well. But that's a question for another day. But I think of all the three motorcycles, this is the most balanced motorcycle and the one that you can easily push around corners.
Okay, so now that we're done with the two off-road focused Moto Morinis, let's talk about this. Now this is Zontes. This is a separate brand from Moto Morini. Of course, it's been brought under the same umbrella. This is the 350T ADV. There's also a standard 350T, and similar to what we saw with the Xcape and Xcape 650X, the differences are tiny. So the first thing is that the ADV gets a 19-inch front wheel versus the standard one gets a 17-inch front wheel. This also gets spoke rims while that gets regular alloys. But aside from that, they're pretty much the same. Now both these bikes have the same engine. It's a single cylinder 348cc engine. Single cylinder liquid cooled, makes 37 bhp and 32 Nm of torque. Of course, it has a 6-speed transmission. Now a big factor on this bike, one of the probably the USPs of this bike, is how many features it has. So I'll just get on to the saddle. And if you want to adjust the windscreen, there's a button for that. If you want to open the fuel tank, there's a button for that. If you want to undo the seat, which I won't do right now because I'm sitting on it, there's also a button for that. So this is sort of loaded up with gizmos. It also has a tire pressure monitoring system. Now, most of the information related to your bike is here. It's on a TFT screen. This screen is not as bright as the ones on the Moto Morini, so in really bright sunlight, it's a little bit hard to see the screen. Now, but aside from that small drawback, it seems pretty good. The switchgear quality is okay. It's not too bad, but they aren't very clicky and the feedback from the switches isn't too great. But it's not a very big complaint. It's just that they don't feel very, very premium. Aside from that, some of the fit and finish is a little bit okay here and there. In terms of the weight, actually, this is not too heavy. I think it's just above 200 kg, so it's not too heavy. The seat height is not too high. So it should be fairly easy, fairly approachable as someone who's buying their first ADV. Now in terms of the suspension, you have an inverted telescopic fork up front. This is a 43mm fork. There's no adjustment here, no payload, nothing. You can't adjust it at all. At the back is a single monoshock. Again, no adjustment there. You get a 320mm single disc up front and a 255mm single disc at the rear. Of course, you have dual channel ABS, but yes, there's no adjustment in terms of the suspension. Now in terms of the braking, you have a single 320mm disc up front and you have a 265mm again single disc at the rear. You have of course disc brakes on both sides, you have ABS on both sides, but yeah, that's about it. So no adjustable suspension. The switchgear quality is okay. It does have a lot of gizmos, so it will be interesting to see how these gizmos fare as you ride them more and more. As a first impression, they are pretty cool. I really do like this windscreen feature. You know, if you want to sort of get a little bit more wind protection on the move, you don't have to get out and adjust it or even pull it on your own. To have this button is actually a really handy feature. Yes, we'll see how this fares in the long term when we do a full proper test. But first impression is cool and it gives that bike a little bit of a wow factor that some bikes in the segment might be lacking. But that's it. This was the first impressions of the overall package. And now Dhruv will come in and tell you the riding experience of the Zontes 350T ADV.
Alright, now I know Karan must have been fawning over the number of buttons on this motorcycle, and honestly when I first sat on it, I was a little confused exactly as to what it happens when you press one particular button. But that's not the point. I'm here to tell you about the riding experience, and with this, the T350, I think it's a motorcycle that's a bit confused. Now you see it's got all these touring accessories, all these off-roading bits like the suspension travel, the spoke rims, and but once you sit on the motorcycle, it's actually a much more comfortable motorcycle if you're actually sitting in the saddle. If you try and stand up, this tank is been chiseled in this way, it actually gets in the way of you gripping the tank. And when you're riding off-road, the first thing that you want to be doing is being able to lock your knees here on this tank. That's something that's a little bit of a problem. You do, if you bend your knees a little, you can get this, but then at this point of time, a lot of the weight is being handled by the backside. and that's not really a comfortable position when you're riding off-road. Even the motor on this one, it's a little too eager, and in terms of power and torque, it's a little too flat. And honestly, to be able to have fun with this motorcycle, you're having to go a lot faster than my skills, or I would generally permit myself. The other motorcycles around here, we've been able to have a lot of fun with them while being relatively slower. On this one, you can have fun, you can do jumps, you can power slide it around all these loose bits, but you have to carry a lot more speed. And I think that's what this motorcycle is trying to do. It's a dual sport motorcycle. It is trying to do as much as it can off-road and on-road, so that it can give you a great touring experience. Honestly, of all these luggage racks over here and everything which support that. But as far as the riding experience goes, I think this is right in the middle. You're not getting the best off-road machine, you're not getting the best bits. You're actually getting a machine that's a little more geared towards on-road riding. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on riding the Zontes 350. So that is it for the off-road bit. Now we are going to go check out the motorcycles that we're supposed to be riding on-road, and yeah, let's get started with that. Alright, now it's time to talk about the bikes that we have ridden on road. Now don't be fooled by our surroundings. We actually had a short span of time with this and the next motorcycle. You get to that. On the road just outside this is the Gurgaon-Faridabad road. Not a long time to gauge the entire motorcycle, but there are some highlights that have sung through. First of all, this is the Zontes R350. Now it's obviously the road focused variant of the off-road one that we showed you earlier, and like that same motorcycle, it's got a lot of buttons, a lot of gadgetry, a lot of stuff you can do here on the MID, and that makes it a very good value proposition. Second of all, the thing I like about this motorcycle, the looks. The front end might not feel so special to some, it does to me, but the rear, oh my god, just lay your eyes once on these, you will be forced to buy it. And even the exhaust design, the double barrel design that comes out here on the side seems very racy. I think if you do this motorcycle up well, it has the potential to look really cool on the streets. The one negative I want to reinforce over here is this engine. It's got a lot of vibes in the sense that not big old vibes, but just like small vibes, but they're persistent all throughout the rev range, no matter where you are revving it. It just feels like there's vibes, especially at the pegs. That takes away a bit from that refined experience, but overall I think that's something that you can learn to live with, seeing what all this motorcycle is offering. Now let's move on to the next one, and that is you can see the smile on the face. That's the Moto Morini, that's the Scrambler road focused one. I still cannot pronounce what's written here in Italian, but the Scrambler that I so loved earlier, this is the on-road version of that motorcycle. I think for me it's a stunning looking motorcycle. It just oozes oomph, and honestly standing here it doesn't look very fast, but I took it out for a spin on the road, and when I whacked that throttle open, I was very surprised, because we've been riding this engine on other motorcycles over here, but obviously we've not gone beyond first to second gear. Out on the highway, triple digit speeds came up very quickly. This has twin cylinder engine. It's got that vibe where you feel that low down torque, and then you just carry it. The gearing is short, so you feel that punch when you're just caning it on the road, and you feel that this motorcycle just quickly wants to get up to speed. The one thing here that I found, like the brakes, they are good, but when you apply them, even if you get on them lightly, the bike tends to pitch forward a lot. And that's a little unnerving if you are not used to it. The other bit is the rear. It's set up stiff, and any undulation I was catching on the highway, it was just throwing it up. Not enough to create a problem, but definitely enough to catch you out. Now obviously I cannot go into a lot of details about this motorcycle because we have not had the time to ride them properly. We will do that once they come to our office and we get to spend some time with them, so that we can tell you exactly how we feel about them. But this is a first glance. So that was all the motorcycles that we rode for today. Let us know which motorcycle you like, which motorcycle you thought was the best out of the lot, which is the one that you have your eye on. And obviously, once we know the price of these motorcycles, this is when the value proposition comes in. This is when we can make a recommendation. We will do that once we know the price of these motorcycles. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until the next one, goodbye.